The fact that war is hell does not give us the right to make it more hellish. The burden that such proposition seeks to prove in today's debate is simple. It's that lethal autonomous weapon systems make war worse. I'm going to do this through 2 points of substantive in my speech. Number one, on how lethal autonomous weapons reduce the accountability of warfare. And secondly, I'm going to explain how this creates an evolution in warfare that leads to a loss of control. But before that, what do these lethal autonomous weapons look like? We think that by virtue of them being autonomous, it means that after programming these machines, they then act in the war zone without human control. That is to say, decisions on how to shoot and how to attack will be made by the technology. We also think that this encompasses all weapon systems in the military. So for example, drones, and for example, tanks. Into substantive. Why do the presence of lethal autonomous weapons decrease accountability? I'm going to prove 3 things to prove that this argument stands. First of all, I'm going to talk about why the occurrence of war increases. Secondly, I'm going to explain why there's little to no oversight of these weapons. And thirdly, I'm going to speak about why it's harder to identify and punish wrongs. Number one, why does the occurrence of war increase? In the world as we know it, there are many pre-existing tensions between nations. These materialize, for example, in the form of territorial disputes, in the form of human rights violations and contrasting values. But right now, countries do not go to war over many of these conflicts because they are limited by, among others, 2 main things. Number one being policymakers' basic consideration for human life that will be lost in the event of soldiers being sent to a war. And secondly, because they know that there will be public outcry at the point at which people know that their brothers and their fathers are being sent off to a far land to die. Why do lethal autonomous weapons change this? Because they decrease the human cost of war and they take humans out of a large portion of fighting of this war. It means that policymakers can now do 2 things. Number one, they can actively lobby for wars to be fought for their nations to go and participate in a conflict that is happening. Secondly, it's also more likely that they know people will not oppose these wars because they know that citizens are less likely to be critical over the decisions they make to go and participate in a conflict. There are 2 harms to this. The first of all being that casualties increase. Because when wars fought, combatants are never the only people on the ground. There are also people, civilians, left there who get caught in the crossfire. And even in the event that there are no human soldiers on the ground in the opposition's world, civilians are still vulnerable to these military attacks. But secondly also, it causes massive infrastructural and economic damage to the country that is fighting the war. This means that it's difficult for these countries to recover after the conflict has occurred. It means that you irreversibly damage the economies and their nations. We think this is terrible. Secondly, why is there little to no oversight of these weapons? I'm going to prove that there is an incentive to place these weapons on a longer leash and release much of the control. Why so? We see precedence of this in the proliferation of drone technology. We see that there is minimal bureaucracy surrounding drone technology in the military in order to create a higher success rate of drone missions. In trend analysis, we also see that US President Donald Trump has been reducing drone restrictions such as the presidential policy guidance, which protect civilians in war zones. By virtue of being autonomous, these weapons are also likely to have little to no human involvement in the oversight and management and the carrying out of these missions. It means that the oversight then decreases. Thirdly, why is it harder to identify and punish wrongs? Number one, because commanders and generals in the army are less connected to the actions of these drones. They are then able to escape many of the consequences. This materializes in the form of them being able to cover up botched operations by saying, you know what, we didn't have that much oversight anyway. Number two, the robots went rogue, and this is something that we cannot control. Even if there is evidence available from logging and tracking these robots, number one, the military has no incentive to release information of its own operations going wrong. We see that they have the means also to keep this information under wraps through acts like the Official Secrets Act. But number two, it's also highly possible that commanders and generals are able to access its information before anyone else does and read it. What is the conclusion then to this argument? It means that when you have lethal autonomous weapons present in the war zone, war is not only more likely, it is also more damaging to civilians and nations, and you reduce the accountability of the people who started this war. Before I move on, yes.
Precisely because lethal autonomous weapons are made to be accurate. That would mean mass destruction wouldn't happen compared to when human soldiers are just doing a shooting spree without any precise target. How do you respond?
Right. I think it's very unfair for them to push the premise on us that these weapon systems are by virtue of themselves perfect and therefore will not cause any damage to civilians and just be infrastructure on the ground. When you drop a bomb on a city, it's not the one person you target who's affected, it's the entire radius of that bomb. Finally, second argument. Why does the evolution warfare lead to a loss of control? I have three main strands to this argument. First of all, I'm going to show you why lethal autonomous weapons will be merciless. Secondly, I'm going to talk about the changing calculus of the self-learning robot. Thirdly, I'm going to talk about the possibility and the ramifications of hacking. Number one, why are lethal autonomous weapons likely to be merciless? In status quo, we see that much of military technology is developed privately. This means that defense contractors and private corporations who are producing the most merciless weapon systems are prioritized because these are the weapon systems that will be most successful. We also see that the military already prioritizes efficiency over ethical warfare at the point at which they're using tactics like the scorched earth tactic to demoralize the other side. But even if these weapon systems are not merciless, we just contend that the terrorists now are able to use, for example, human shields in order to protect themselves, and your missions consistently fail. Let's talk then about the changing calculus of a self-learning robot. If it's in some cases, we argue that these autonomous weapon systems will be artificial intelligence, which are able to learn, adapt, and reprogram themselves. We think that this could lead to a consequence in which they are able to weigh their own objectives in order for a successful mission over civilian life. Finally, let's talk about hacking and why the ease of hacking increases. Traditional weapons have always been offline and by virtue of that, harder to hack. The modernization of military technology means that weapons are now wireless, and lethal autonomous weapons are the best example of this. Besides that, because these weapons are not human operated and there is a degree of separation between the human and the machine, it means that any hacking will be A, harder to detect, secondly, harder to counter. We saw precedents of this hacking happening in December 2011 when Iran hacked the US RQ-170 drone. Why is this hacking so pernicious? Because the military operates on centralized systems, the point at which a hacker gains access to one drone, it can gain access to all of the other weapons that operate on that system. And because damage concluded in war is irreversible, we think that the harms of this are very, very real. To conclude, because lethal autonomous weapons are merciless and susceptible to hijacking, we oppose the development of these systems. Thank you.
Proposition brings in argument an idea that they really need to have a humane and just war. But they do the exact opposite, because the fact that a lethal autonomous robot would have been just as effective in killing these people and would have killed the people that we were sending them to kill as well, that is the inhumane war that they bring. When you bring only human soldiers into the battlefield in war, you prolong it instead of ending it fast. Proposition needs to engage in a scenario in which the war happens anyways, and who creates a more effective war, and who creates a more efficient one, and that it ends faster. What is the mechanism on our side of the house? Firstly, we're going to make sure that these lethal autonomous robots that will be employed are weapons that undergo rigorous testing, which makes it unlikely for them to malfunction. We're going to make sure we discuss it in international talks, for example, on how April this year we have a convention of certain conventional weapons discussing the implementation of these lethal autonomous weapons and the boundaries that we should set for them. Secondly, we're going to implement a self-destructing mechanism in these lethal autonomous robots, so if any hacking or whatsoever terrorist who wants to attack and get these informations and blueprints about these robots, it's not going to happen. Thirdly, we don't have to defend the full and completely utilization of these weapons, because no matter how sophisticated the technology is, in some instances of war, such as interrogations, communication, and releasing hostages, it still requires human involvement. So what do we envision these drones and lethal autonomous weapons to do? Firstly, detect these targets and identities using these kinds of things such as facial recognition that we already have in the status quo. Second, calculate the risk of the weapons. Thirdly, minimize casualty. Fourthly, make decisions without prioritizing these self-defenses. Fifth, function without these fatigue. And lastly, immune to chemical and biological weapons that humans inherently can. Before I go on to my arguments, 2 points of rebuttal. Firstly, proposition says that these lethal autonomous weapons reduce the accountability of the war. We have 4 responses to this. Firstly, if proposition talks about the cost of these human soldiers, we believe that we already have costs too on our side of the house. The cost of developing these weapons, the maintaining these weapons, and furthermore, these soldiers and these victims still dying on the battlefield. We believe that we still have costs and consideration for the government before they send these lethal autonomous weapons. But what is worse on their side of the house is the fact that they use human soldiers as that cost for these battlefields, and we believe that that's inherently unjustified because then governments can use these human soldiers as propaganda to then justify war and, for example, like retaliating because your soldiers are dying. We believe that these kinds of propaganda is going to be happening on their side of the house the moment they use human soldiers. Even if they have a cost of humans on their side of the house, the result is bad. Because then governments will just remove their troops out of that war zone. As we can see with the US when it drew back its troops from Afghanistan, it resulted in the proliferation of terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda. We don't believe that that stands. But let's look at the things such as economic damages to their nations, what they say there's economic cost. We don't think that this is mutually exclusive at all because on our side of the house, the moment you go into war with these lethal autonomous weapons, you could also have economic costs that prevents these governments from going to war. But when they want to talk about accountability on how these commanders and generals, you can account them for what they do, we don't think that this is true at all. Because the thing with human soldiers is that it's very hard for you to account them for their crimes. We can see in the ICC there's a lot of criminal cases and war crimes that are left untouched by them because of human soldiers. On the comparison, lethal autonomous weapons is very easy for you to create accountability there because the person that you are creating accountability to is the government and the state, and we think that that is more accountable on our side of the house. Even if the state in most instances still neglects these things, there's always going to be push from the government to develop the technology to become more better and protect these people more and make these lethal autonomous weapons better protected. But let's go on to the first argument on why the utilization of human soldiers creates a more dangerous war. The war right now is state versus non-state actors, that is the terrorist organizations. In the status quo, the moment we rely ourselves only on human soldiers, there are many factors that hamper our ability to fight the war against terrorist organizations such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda. 2 reasons. Firstly, the human soldier inherently has limited capacity due to the innate human characteristics, such as fatigue, fear, environmental heat, and harsh terrain are obstacles that make in a human. In the moment where we find another alternative, who are for example, more precise and more long-lasting, we have robots in the status quo equipped with these facial recognition that can take down leaders of terrorist organizations. We believe that we create a more effective war. But secondly, human soldiers are inherently weaker. When ISIS captures them because of their own psychological vulnerability and fear, they're more likely going to spill information to these terrorists in exchange of their lives. Al-Qaeda received 55.1 million euros in ransom payments from these governments. Furthermore, ISIS can release videos of mutilation of the soldiers and inflict fears to the public. These kinds of things can only happen when you use human soldiers and not when you use lethal autonomous weapons. These kinds of exploitation happens with soldiers. That is the condition in an ongoing war. But now I'll explain why proposition makes post-war rehabilitation for the soldiers worse. Because when we utilize human soldiers in a war, proposition subjects them to a life of post-traumatic stress disorder, unable to communicate normally with their parents, spouses, and children. The most important of them all is that you doom them to a life of suffering after the war, knowing that a lethal autonomous weapon would have been just as effective and accurate in combating these terrorists and rebels. On the comparative, our side uses no human soldiers here. So there's no such thing such as mental illness, psychological vulnerabilities that come in the war. On our side of the house, human soldiers will be deployed in much safer conditions, evacuating and giving aids to the civilians, peacekeeping, or giving information to the local community about the war. Only on proposition can we protect the soldiers and the war. Before I go on to my second argument on how we create accountability, is there any POS?
What will happen if your robot is faced with a child soldier? Will it shoot it?
We believe that these robots, in the instances of these lethal autonomous robots, they can already sense the people who are, for example, needs to be shot. For example, if they see a child soldiers, we can tell them to shoot, for example, the hands of these children so that the weapons get tackled. But on the case of human soldiers, you're just going to recklessly either not shoot this child soldier and let this child soldier create a lot of suicide bombings, or you're going to shoot that child, and we don't think that humans calculus is better. But let's go on to the second argument on how we create more accountability in the war. When soldiers come into the war with virtuous intent, it is the harrowing conditions of war that strip them of their moral codes. Despite condemnation from society, we still war crimes being prevalent in society. The ICC still has tons of uncovered war crimes. I will explain this idea in 3 ways. Firstly, the constant exposure to extremely violent atmospheres engrave violent tendencies in their nature. 12 American soldiers blew up and shot Afghan civilians at random and collected their fingers at sport. Soldiers are a tool of war that is difficult to find accountable, and they're too risky for these types of war zones. But secondly, in the stressful field of war, a lot of soldiers turn to sexual assault for consolation. Look at the case of World War II, in which Japanese soldiers raped thousands of Chinese and Korean women, turning them into sex slaves. The United States soldiers in Haiti have been sexually abusing these women and minors. This is the flaw in human soldiers because they harm those that they should have been protecting. But thirdly, soldiers are independent and we cannot control their mindsets. Too many war crimes have been left unprosecuted, like these rape cases of the Bosnian Serbian army have been left uncovered. On the comparative though, lethal autonomous weapons may not be regulated by law, but they can never violate the code of conduct anyway. It is programmed to operate and abide by the metrics of the war and operates under full surveillance. Even in the rare instances of faulty maneuvers, it can be swiftly directed and attended to, intercepting further damage. Lethal autonomous weapons don't inherit these destructive characteristics that human does. They don't have these kinds of limitations that human characteristics give. We should never settle with a proposal that puts civilians in even more danger and misery we're so proud to oppose.
I will not contend that humans are perfect. Humans have been held accountable for war crimes, they have conducted heinous acts. But that isn't the debate that we're having today. Because in our world, one, we're going to prove to you that a lot of these heinous acts occur under military supervision. If you think about it, a lot of our soldiers are sworn under the same Geneva Convention, they are sworn under the same human rights accords, yet they still conduct such heinous acts. What does that tell you? It tells you 2 things. One, military generals either are not aware about it or turn a blind eye, given that a lot of these harmful outcomes, a lot of these harmful actions demotivate the enemy, they demoralize the enemy, make it easier to win a war. If this is true, and they are full aware of the horrible acts that occur, then the only logical inference then is that a lethal autonomous weapon in the world of opposition is just as likely to be merciless, is just as likely to be heartless, because it achieves the same aims of demotivating the enemy, incapacitating the enemy, burning down villages, achieves the same aims whether it's done by a soldier or it's done by a lethal autonomous weapon. The Geneva Convention exists under both sides. Government's opposition's fear in this debate is that this technology will be created, but the manifestation of this technology and the motives of this technology are the same under both circumstances, and they are bred out of those same military generals. So what do we mean by this? One, the programming of the levels of respect that these lethal autonomous weapons have for opposition forces is just likely to be as low. They are likely to be told to be merciless, to shoot down innocent civilians, to gun down those that raise that white flag. What is the comparison then on a first response from side government? It is true that in our world some humans commit cruel acts, but some of them have consciences as well. 2, in the event that human rights abuses do occur, humans in our world can speak out about the truth in comparison to a lethal autonomous weapon that can be disassociated from this, that states can disassociate from in this world. They can delete footage, they can disassociate themselves from the robot, they can call it a malfunction on behalf of technology. So in understanding under both circumstances horrible outcomes are likely to occur, it is more reasonable to believe that humans can be held to account for these horrible outcomes, if not talk about the truth in comparison to a lethal autonomous weapon that is entirely held at a state's disposal to conduct such harmful acts. That was the first response. The second question I'll ask from side government is, are wars likely to occur? Because the response we hear from side opposition is we still have things like cost of maintenance of technology. Humans are still using their propaganda because some people are caught in warfare and need to save them. The cost of maintenance of technology isn't that much of a convincing factor to hold people in our borders in comparison to soldiers that might die in the war zone. So on a net or on a scale, it is more likely that we instigate unjust wars in the world of opposition, because when it comes to territorial disputes or human rights abuses, this will be the trigger-happy approach that states will take, and we don't think side opposition is winning this comparison. The third question that I'll ask is, are robots better than humans? I think this is very interesting. Robots and humans differ on only two premises. Firstly, physical differences, and secondly, psychological differences. When it comes to physical differences, I agree with the speaker before me. They are more prone to chemical suffering, they're more mortal. They have differences in terms of accuracy and the ability to target projected attacks. What is the comparison there? Because this technology will only be available to us in 30 to 50 years, and all the mechanical advancements that side opposition gets and attaches to a lethal autonomous weapon can also be attached to a soldier in our world. Things like smart bullets, things like infrared technology to detect enemy hostages to avoid civilian casualties. All those technologies to correct mechanical human failure will still be available to side government, and we will still be able to reduce human casualties and human error when it comes to a war zone. We will still be able to mitigate the loss of lives, and we think that that is a non-issue in this debate. The only difference then is the psychological differences between a robot and a person, and we think that it's especially important in the war zone to have levels of empathy, levels of rationality, and levels of relatability. People need to be empathetic, to take a pause in the war zone to save a wounded child or an unharmed civilian. People need to look at the bigger picture and adapt to the war zone, and not just have a single objective that they will achieve at all costs. Side opposition's world looks at it like one where these lethal autonomous weapons will make the calculus that killing one drug leader or a drug cartel leader is worth sacrificing hundreds or thousands of lives. They'll make the calculus that human shields are a non-starter and need to be taken down if it means we need to take down that drug lord. And this is not something that we are willing to settle for inside government. We need levels of human empathy and human rationality and relatability in this war zone to make it a humane war. Sure.
Exactly, because humans have emotions. Don't you think that they will have fear that it will be used by terrorist organizations to exploit that?
That is true. I understand that in certain instances humans might turn over to the other side, they might spill over information. But that is a minute harm in comparison to the ruthlessness of this robot that you're letting out into the battlefield. The fourth question of response is, what about hacking? The only response we heard to this from side opposition is that we have drone tests, we actually have thorough tests, and as a result, hacking won't happen. This completely dismisses the Prime Minister's analysis or example of instances where hacking has been occurred, where American drones have been commandeered by Iranian or Russian spies. The fact that states invest in cyber warfare as a significant part of winning that war and winning that physical war. Hacking is a real threat, and the point at which it's an autonomous weapon, have a seat, without any human interference with it, it's much more difficult to detect this hacking and reduce the possibility of harm. Given that I've dealt with a lot of responses, I'm going to move on to my arguments. Why do laws instill a state of fear within society? We think that in status quo, people on the ground are in a state of fear and hostility when we look at innocent civilians. And we think the introduction of lethal autonomous weapons makes this all worse, for three reasons. One, the fact that individuals can't relate to lethal autonomous weapons more than they can relate to soldiers in a battlefield. Grief-stricken by trauma, it becomes worse inside opposition. Two, an increase in heartless, data-based decisions like shooting and indiscriminate shootings in the side of opposition makes it far less relatable to civilians on the ground. Three, we would argue that data is heavily corrupted in the war zone. What do I mean? If on record, Afghan forces are seen as more likely to be unfriendly because on a balance of probability and historically they were unfriendly in the past, this lethal autonomous weapon is likely to be more aggressive to Afghan forces as well as Afghan civilians based on those defining characteristics and increased levels of hostility for everyone on the ground on that battlefield. And lastly and most importantly, the occurrences of hacking just generally increase levels of fear, hostility, and trauma. Why is all of this important? Have a seat. The the main goal of opposition from the first minute of their speech is that we need to end wars quicker. In order to end wars quicker, we need cooperation on the ground. If people are afraid, if people don't trust incoming forces on that battlefield, they're less likely to divulge information that your lethal autonomous weapon would need to make a surgical attack. They're less likely to cooperate in evacuations when it comes to allied forces coming in. A reduction in information, because trust is void inside opposition, makes it harder to end wars quicker. It makes it harder to end wars in a just manner because people are less likely to divulge information. What kinds of information are we talking about? Presence of military bases, the areas where soldiers are locked up, plans of terrorist organizations. These are pivotal in solving wars, and we don't get that inside opposition. The second part of this, when it comes to PTSD, or the argumentation that was made by the speaker before me. PTSD is a horrible act, but to a certain degree, soldiers have consented to some level of psychological harm and they've gone to the war zone. Individuals who haven't consented to similar levels of psychological harm are civilians who will see metal behemoths in the war zone and suffer similar levels of PTSD, grief, and trauma. War is messy, war is hellish. But do not give side opposition another reason to complicate matters for the most vulnerable groups in that war zone.
Side affirmative cannot continuously operate under a scenario where lethal autonomous weapon is imperfect. They have to engage in a scenario where countries indeed have the incentive to develop that weapon into a weapon that came to their benefit. Because we believe that there is no country that would develop such an expensive and exquisite weapon that requires so long to develop for nothing. They would make sure that it was completely ready to be deployed. It is completely ready to serve their vision and mission. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, we believe that it is them being very negligent towards all our arguments about the sophistication and accuracy of lethal autonomous weapon that helps us win war more effectively. Further, another thing that they have never touched on their second speaker is about the dying human soldiers. They have never explained to you why it is justified to continuously deploy human soldiers on war, letting them get exposed to the sarin gas, to cluster munition, to all these horrible weapons that no one should ever encounter in their life, ladies and gentlemen. We say that under ourselves, if we could win the war with the same effectivity, it is much better to deploy lethal autonomous weapons that doesn't sacrifice human soldiers. My extension today will explain to you as how we will create a society that pushes for a resolution of war that protects the civilians underground. Later, moving on to my rebuttals. 3 points of rebuttal. Firstly, we argued upon how merciless characteristic of war criminals will be inputted into these lethal autonomous weapons, hence making it merciless. I have 2 responses to this. Firstly, they admit that war crimes are heinous in nature. It is something that the state and each general would like to avoid for 2 reasons. Because firstly, the characteristic of war crimes inside a lethal autonomous weapon will diverse this lethal autonomous weapon from the mission it is entrusted with, which means it will give a cost of time and energy towards the general. And hence we say it is unlikely for them to want to put a war crime characteristic into this lethal autonomous weapon. But secondly, realize that exactly because it is heinous in nature, international scrutiny will exist, which means most likely state wouldn't want to develop a lethal autonomous weapon that could do a shooting frenzy like what human soldiers could do, ladies and gentlemen. So we say that in nature, lethal autonomous weapon is much more merciful. Moving on to my second response. So what is the kind of lethal autonomous weapon that is most likely to be developed? We will develop something that is everything of our ideal human soldiers, just without its flaw. The flaw that we're talking about is the emotions. 2 reasons. Firstly, if they want to talk about child soldiers, then realize that precisely because human soldiers would empathize with these child soldiers, they would let the child soldier explode together with the bomb, killing thousands of civilians, women, and minors around that area. We say this is much more horrendous in nature under the side of the house. This is where the empathy they want to talk about become completely irrelevant. But we can argue that humans can be trained to be as perfect as lethal autonomous weapons. My first speaker have explained to you about how there are limitations in humans. They even have explained to you about the empathy that inheres in the nature of humans, which makes humans inherently imperfect to become a tool of war. We oppose the use of human soldiers. Before moving on to my second rebuttal, sure,
Even if states have incentives to develop the perfect weapon, it's not necessary that they have the ability to do so. Please explain why then lethal autonomous weapons are perfect under your side.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's compare the worst case scenario. I will engage in which our little autonomous weapon are not perfect. Then we say at least accountability will be better under our side. Why so? Because when the state knows there's an error within this particular little autonomous weapon, they will do everything in their power to repair it, to make sure it is able to actually engage in a more proper one the next time, even if it is concealed under their side. When we want to talk about errors of human, it is something that is irreparable, something that no matter how much the state wants to change, it cannot be changed. That is why accountability is also better under our side. Second point of rebuttals, they want to argue that the occurrence of war will increase due to the lesser cost of lethal autonomous weapons. I will explain to you 5 distinct reasons to why it wouldn't, right? Because firstly, there will be the development and maintenance of their technology that are still high cost. Second, there's international sanction. Thirdly, losing geopolitical trade. Fourth, unfavorable refugees. And 5, political barrier from opposition parties to stop war. That is why their next speaker couldn't come up to you and say that occurrence of war will exist, because we say that all of this is also part of the rationale of a state. Hence, we take this one. But lastly, right, we want to argue that civilians will be less cooperative because they are afraid. This is not mutually exclusive, considering that they admit war crimes to exist under their side of the house, which means most likely civilians on the ground are also afraid of soldiers. The women in Congo and the miners are afraid of all the human soldiers that constantly gang rape them every day. The people in Japan, Korea are afraid of the soldiers that constantly rape them every day. Ladies and gentlemen, we say if you want to talk about fear inside the civilians, it also exists within the human soldiers because of all the war crimes that they have admitted to. That is why we say, at the end of the day, if you want to talk about a more effective war, we say it's better under our side, right? Because we provide for you a weapon that is much more flawless, a weapon that will always continue to develop, a weapon that is more effective, and a weapon that is more accountable. We have also proved to you that the existence of these weapons doesn't increase the occurrence of war, hence we don't see any harm coming from their side of the house. But moving on to my extension, before that, sure.
So, given there are two sides in a war, one side commits all these heinous acts, the other side is your allied force. Even having your allied force use lethal autonomous weapons will traumatize all the civilians on the ground, thus reducing their ability to divulge information.
That is not mutually exclusive. All the weapons that they use under their side, the bombs and the fighter jet they want to talk about, also will scare the civilians on the ground. They have to start explaining why their arguments is inherently explosive, unless so, we don't think they can win this debate. Moving on to my expansion, let's talk about how we will create a society that pushes for a solution of war that protects the civilian on the ground. This is an argument that takes affirmative activities. Ladies and gentlemen, affirmative would want to talk about political push to stop the war. I tell you that abruptly stopping the war doesn't stop the humanitarian crisis. Keep in mind that human rights inhere not only the soldiers but also the civilians. No thank you. Even if society's force manage to stop the war, it is not an upright solution. It is a solution that protects the soldier but puts more misery for the civilians. They are the side that will fail to reinstate the condition for the society. I will explain the problem in 2 tiers. Firstly, in the status quo, the media and society mainly focuses on the soldiers dying out there and never the victims. This is precisely why society only feels empathetic to the soldiers. This directly results in the second problem, in which the political force the government to refrain from the war abruptly. On the surface, this sounds good. The war stopped. But I tell you, this is the kind of solution that caused Afghanistan to become the breeding ground of Taliban, and Iraq a breeding ground of Al-Qaeda. A solution that indeed protects our soldiers, but put more misery onto civilians. This is not the kind of solution we'd like for our society to push for. And this will be changed under our side for 3 reasons. Firstly, the utilization of lethal autonomous weapons will shift media's attention to the civilian casualties, something it should have been highlighting since long time ago. Second, the discussion of the society will then change. It is no longer about how to protect human soldiers, but also about how to protect the civilians from the harrowing state they currently have to live in. But thirdly, we establish political force to create a solution that helps re-establish the condition for the civilians on the ground. This touch core issues like defeating terrorists, re-establishment of government, restoration of facilities, and even compensation for civilians. This is the solution we wish for society to push for. Only when we end the war this way, we fortify human life, both the soldiers and the civilians. Very proud to propose.
the point in which civilians see unrelatable metallic behemoths storming their homes, pillaging their villages, and taking everything they care about away from them, is the point in which you reduce their capacity to cooperate with you and to ensure that military operations succeed. Two questions I'll answer in this debate. The first, where is war better? And secondly, with regards to accountability. Note that if I prove we have more accountability in our world, I also prove that there are less war crimes that occur. Because if there is more accountability, generals are more scared of opting into war crimes. But before that, one thing that doesn't fit in. The deputy leader of opposition made an argument at around 7:30 about how the media is more likely to focus on civilian casualties in their world. Three responses. I think they're like just through human nature, they're more likely to focus on these new cool Robocop-like machines that seem very interesting and new. But secondly, I don't understand why American media are likely to focus on casualties that they cause and they are the cause of. And lastly, if you amp up the amount of civilian casualties that happen in your world, then people are more likely to hate LAWs and you have less political capital to enter wars. So it's simply unstrategic for foreign media to amp up civilian casualties caused by the weapons you claim are so necessary for us to fight wars. That being said, first question I'll answer, where is war better? But a point of clarification before that. Just because less soldiers die in their world doesn't mean there's a less net loss of human life. Because I think the nuance they miss is that even though there's less deaths of soldiers, there's more deaths of civilians. The first premise that they brought up is that war is more surgical. The hardware of these machines cannot keep up with the software. What do I mean? They maybe LAWs can navigate the best strategy to act upon, but they simply don't have the guns, they simply don't have the capacity to act on that said plan. They don't have a bullet that can curve through half a state and hit someone. This is something they have to deal with as well. Secondly, even if we have weapons like that, these are things that soldiers would have access to. But thirdly, and here's the nuance in the motion, that they need to tell us why the development of autonomous weapons are likely to be surgical. We told you from Prime Minister that they are unlikely to be surgical because in their development, defense contractors make more money in developing merciless, more effective weapons that get jobs done faster. That means defense contractors and militaries have no incentive to build surgical weapons because they simply lose their effectivity in their case. Heavy C. But lastly, and perhaps most importantly, note that all the information that LAWs get are only based on past missions. They do not have human intuition to take into account unforeseen circumstances that Prime Minister alluded is very likely in battlefields where a lot of unforeseen things can happen. This is why we need human beings that are capable of taking into account more than just the rules, more than just what they are programmed with, and take into account basic human empathy and basic human intuition that sort of house doesn't have. But even if it's more surgical in their world, we told you we are likely to enter more wars. And opposition has two responses to this. The first, that they have other costs involved in war. So perhaps, but the human cost is likely to be the most important cost and the most important deterring factor in entering a war. But secondly, at the very least, it's one additional cost. So on a comparative, there's more political capital to not enter in wars in our world. But thirdly, I think there's more government propaganda in your side where we coerce citizens to enter wars, because when governments want to go to war for resources like they did in Iraq and Afghanistan, people no longer have to consider their brothers and sisters dying. They can just go along with the plan because there is no human cost involved to their soldiers, to their brothers, to their fathers and mothers. The problem with this is maybe American soldiers don't die, but Iraqis die, Afghans die. The point in which you have more wars and more capacity to intervene unfairly in these areas. But then the second response that I have received is opposition says we pull out of areas that we shouldn't pull out of, so we pull out of interventions that are necessary. We think it's untrue because there's currently already enough political capital for just wars, because we can say that look, your brothers and sisters are fighting for good cause, they are fighting to defend our land, to defend innocent people, so we already have enough political capital to do that. But secondly, government would assert that there's the vast majority of wars are really unjust, right? It's often people taking things for resources, for territory, and things we shouldn't get involved in. But even in the worst case scenario, if it is true, every single intervention opposition enters is good, we think intervention is more often than not bad for two reasons. One, it often leads to an escalation of violence. So if you have more LAWs, the opposing side has to amp up their attack and you lead to more collateral damage among the forces. But secondly, there's more anti-West sentiment in your world when you send more troops. So regardless of whether it's soldiers or metallic behemoths, the fact that you're sending more of them and more people and more guns and more weapons means you amp up that anti-West sentiment. What's the conclusion to this issue? That in their world, you have more debts as a result of this. And even if you don't believe there are more debts, there are more economic damage, more infrastructural damage in their world, which leads to citizens living a horrible quality of life in their world where they don't have basic necessities to support themselves. Before I move on to my next issue, defend yourself.
Anti-war sentiment will also not exist under our side because government will use the propaganda of retaliation and revenge for the blood of the dying brothers and sisters that you explained about.
Yeah, okay, so I'm getting to how it's far worse in your world and how people can't relate and so on, right? So with regards to accountability, here are 6 reasons why accountability is worse in their world. A, evidence can be deleted. And evidence is likely to be deleted because even if there is like proof eventually that the evidence was deleted, there is no longer substantial evidence to prove the original claim. So you might be able to prove corruption, but you're not going to be able to prove a war crime, right? Because the substantial evidence to prove said war crime is taken away. But second, there's very likely to be biased information and implicit programming. So for instance, they may program that you must obey the Geneva Convention to not kill non-combatants, but they will also program that most Afghans in this area are combatants. So these are percentages that the LAW is likely to take into account to violate these conventions and create war crimes, and that happens more in your world. Heavy C. So the comparative is soldiers are more likely to call their commanders out, the point in which their commanders attempt to brainwash them because they don't want to get tried in the ICC. They don't want to suffer, and because of this self-preservation instinct, they are likely to call out war crimes. Thirdly, we told you that these things are often highly confidential, so they are likely to be held under the Official Secrets Act. Not even Congress has enough oversight in military secrets. But lastly, and I think most persuasively, it's easier to prosecute in our world because humans are likely to rat out each other. Because of the guilt, because of the PTSD that the side of opposition talks about, they are likely to not be able to live with themselves and rat out criminals for their war crimes. And even if they are not altruistic, they can often gain immunity by ratting people out on these war crimes, and hence they are more likely to do in our world. The comparative is robots who have no conscience, no capacity to feel guilty about the things they have done, and less ability to rat these individuals out. But lastly, and I think this was largely ignored, right, that hacking is very, very likely to happen in their world because the systems are more online and there's no mechanical way of us using human oversight. Secondly, systems are very centralized because they need to coordinate attacks in a coordinated manner. But here's the nuance, that if we hack one drone, there's a bit of damage. If you even hack one LAW in the world of opposition, countries can be destroyed, states can be destroyed. And I think this is especially pernicious because they have to be absolutely perfect. Even in a case where one LAW is attacked, the world, nations are destroyed and states can be gone. Never been prouder to protect.
Ladies and gentlemen, on side opposition, we recognize that the incentive for war exists. But the thing is, if that particular nation, such as the US that they mentioned, that have interest in Iraq, really does want to do that, they'll do it regardless. Because recognize that they have myriad of weapons that don't need soldiers. They have nukes, they have biological weapons, they have chemical weapons, they have all those bombs, hydrogen bombs that literally can cause collateral damage without any damage to their soldiers. What does this show to you? In the instances in which war occurs, our side is the side that provides the best chance for civilians to stay alive. A chance, the fact that they are not the target, ladies and gentlemen. Our side is the only side that does that. Their side dooms civilians to their death. 2 questions in this debate. Firstly, is it principally justified to use lethal autonomous weapon? Secondly, what will happen to the nature of war? Firstly, is it principally justified to use lethal autonomous weapon? And I think this correlates strongly with the nature of how these weapons will operate. They tell you that the robots will be merciless and they can self-learn. 3 responses to this. Firstly, military of nations don't have the incentive to make these robots
self-learn, ladies and gentlemen. The fact that they are at risk, the fact that they robots can go and attack themselves means that they don't want these robots to attack themselves to begin with. But secondly, we can actually create robots that actually upholds the human right, the convention of lethal autonomous weapons that we told you since first. The difference is, sure, we get it, soldiers say their oath before they become soldiers, but they never are prepared for the horror of war. Seeing their brothers in a pool of blood, seeing their limbs, ladies and gentlemen, attacked by terrorists, no trainings whatsoever is equivalent to the horror of war. But thirdly, military contractors will have the utmost incentive to ensure that these robots aren't held as merciless as what they want you to believe. Just like the echo of fear that is apparent in the tone of proposition, you'll know that society doesn't necessarily favor AI. What does this show to you? This shows that there'll be immense media attention on how these weapons are developed. And I think that this military contractors have the utmost incentive to create it to become half as merciless as what they want you to do, because the way they gain profit is by producing the weapons. And the only way they can do that is when society actually favors them, ladies and gentlemen. That's why these robots will be human. Having established that, what are the moral principles in this debate? We say that firstly, it's abhorrent to use soldiers when you can't protect them from horror of war, from being haunted by the vivid memories of seeing their comrades in a pool of blood. We say that individuals need to be protected, especially when the war that we are facing in the status quo is getting more and more inhuman, such as the use of chemical and biological weapons, such as China, which developed 800-meter flash-burning laser gun which attacks your soldier. The fact that they could have been protected, that they could have been saved, that other life could be saved, it is the line of what we champion on opposition. We say, we're very clear that all lives are important. They need to be protected. Sure, soldiers consent to becoming soldiers, but they never know what lies in the war, ladies and gentlemen. They never know what damage they could cause to their life. I think the moment when you can protect these individuals, you should. But secondly, it's just horrible for their sentences to simply settle with the status quo when there are myriad of misconducts that we have posed to you since first, when you could have saved more civilians, ladies and gentlemen. We give you 3 reasons on this. The fact that they are able to get tired means that they are likely to be inaccurate in doing so. This is different with lethal autonomous weapons when they have 100% sensitivity that it's accurate, it's programmed, and it doesn't fire civilians. But secondly, human needs to do self-defense mechanism. And I think this is something that they ignore since their second speaker. For every 100 terrorists that are killed, 57 civilians are killed by the soldiers. They're shot because soldiers need to protect themselves. They can't risk seeing citizens in the fear that they might carry bomb, ladies and gentlemen. Robots don't have the intention to self-protect, therefore you protect civilians better in our side of the house. But thirdly, regarding the idea of war crimes, the horror of war that is caused to the civilian, the fact that they could be raped, ladies and gentlemen, they inflict this harm to the society. Sure.
If people are already so against artificial intelligence, why would governments give citizens more information to fight against this artificial intelligence?
Yeah, government isn't the entity that gives out the information. Obviously, we have media in the status quo, such as Fox News, VOX, not FOX, and BBC, and CNN, ladies and gentlemen, all of which are liberal medias that protect human rights. That's why you know the violations of human rights that are occurring in Syria. Then they give you the idea of accountability. They gave you 6 reasons, which I only heard 4. They told you that evidence can be deleted, that there is bias, and this is highly confidential. Look, these are not exclusive at all, ladies and gentlemen. You can still delete evidence by the war crimes that you do with soldiers. We don't get what they get out of here. But fourthly, the only thing we heard is that they can rat out each other. Look, who did they rat out these individuals to? To ICJ, which is literally controlled by the United States, ladies and gentlemen. They have no no mechanism, so on and so forth. At least under our side, you can still protect the soldier, you can still fix the system. Well, this nature of human are innate, the fact that they need sexual satisfaction in the midst of war. But moving on to, we have proven to you how our side is the side that best protects civilians. But moving on to the second clash, what will happen to the nature of war? We literally gave you 5 independent reasons to why this is the case. The fact that they have trade, infrastructure damage means that your trade with that nation is going to be damaged as well. But secondly, economic costs. In the case of Donald Trump, literally one of the things that made him win is literally the fact that US spent $7 billion on a war in Afghanistan. And this is extremely important. But thirdly, the fact that you ruin geopolitical relations. Fourthly, refugees that flood to nations like EU. Fifthly, the political barriers. And sixthly, which came from them, is the idea of collateral damage that you can have, ladies and gentlemen. That's why it's unlikely to have happen under our side. Because if it's true, but you know what's weird? They told you that the fact that there's no deterrence, the fact that there's no human soldiers means that there are no deterrents. But then they say their side will have these weapons as well, only with the soldiers. They say that this can protect soldiers. That necessarily, under their side of the house, these political barriers don't exist too, because soldiers will still be protected. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, we've proven to you how our side will not have more war. And I'm going to give you 3 reasons that we have 2 things first to why we're better. Firstly, is because war is even less likely when you have media focus. But secondly, war best ends under our side of the house. The fact that you can actually recognize the war, ladies and gentlemen. For all of those reasons, because we are the side that don't discriminate lives, I'm so proud to oppose.
Affirmative wants to deploy human soldiers regardless of these lethal autonomous weapons that can achieve the same results or even better. This is inherently merciless in and of itself. Merciless to the suffering of these human lives and soldiers and suffering of the victims of war crimes. They haven't been able to explain or give any one single harm of lethal autonomous weapons other than they have no empathy and emotions, which has already been tackled on our side of the house. Under this basis, we think that opposition should win this debate. But furthermore, there's 2 clashes in the debate. Firstly, on who protects the soldiers and civilians in war, and secondly, which war becomes then more humane. Let's look at the first clash and who protects the civilians and soldiers. What proposition brought to us in this debate was that lethal autonomous weapons would kill the civilians in warfare. What we have to respond to is that the sophistication of these robots. Because anyways, we've responded that these lethal autonomous weapons would constantly be developed to be perfect, and these states will always have the political push if these lethal autonomous weapons turns out to be more dangerous in the battlefield. The society and backlash will create more political push to be constantly developing for these robots. And furthermore, we've already explained on why countries and states wouldn't just employ untested or prematurely crafted robots simply because it could just jeopardize their own whole entire mission. Why then, under proposition, will lethal autonomous weapons, if perfect, still unjustified? Because let's go in the best case scenario for proposition in which these lethal autonomous weapons are not perfect. Then we've responded that there's always push to create and develop stronger mechanisms and weapons. They have brought the idea of Geneva Convention. Then we question that if these standards and conventions exist, then why countries will not randomly use these lethal autonomous weapons that are not advanced yet? Why wouldn't they abide to these standards yet? They've completely neglected, furthermore, our arguments on how we create a better rehabilitation and safer conditions for the soldiers in living there. Because they've said on how we said that there's already post-traumatic stress disorder and a lot of psychological harm that could happen on the soldiers. They've responded to this by saying that these soldiers, they signed up for it, they already know the cost. Well, we've already clearly said in our third speaker and our second on how these kinds of PTSD, you don't know that prerequisite to joining the army. You don't all know all these things. It can only happen because of that harsh environment of war. That is why we prefer these lethal autonomous robots that could replace these things. But let's say proposition will keep on playing in their best case scenario on how you can have all these sophisticated tech features that can be employed in these soldiers. We've explained that this is not inherently able, because if these, for example, all these weapons and all these sophisticated robots and guns are put in soldiers, such as infrared, then why will people still oppose lethal autonomous robots? We've already explained. Furthermore, when these say on the issue of hacking, We've said that drones are not going to be prone to hacking, because the fact that we have nuclear weapons in the status quo that couldn't be acquired by terrorists and very hard to be hacked, there's already existing mechanisms to stop this hacking from occurring. But even if it is hacked on our side of the house, it takes a long time to redirect that hacking, and we've already explained in our model on how there's going to be self-destructive mechanisms that will disable these terrorist organizations to do so. But let's look at the second clash and which war is more humane. They said that war will be prevented because of the cost of human soldiers. We've already responded to this sufficiently by saying that when there's push to stop the war because of human soldiers, this is going to be harmful for the stability of these states and also for the war. Because of these propaganda from these states by justifying these wars and creating the proliferation of terrorist organizations once we take out the soldiers from that area. But even if it's their best case scenario in which there's a push to stop the war, this is just morally bankrupt. Because the fact that you make humans the cost of the war is principally unjustified. On our side, we have already explained on how these lethal autonomous robots would be the one targeting these terrorist organizations. On the comparative, their side engages humans versus humans in a war which is even more inhumane. Panel, what you have to realize is that the demons in the war is not robots or algorithms. It is not these actions made with data and calculus that's programmed to adhere to international laws and think the way an informed military general would in this prime condition. The demons that you have to be afraid of in the war are humans' action when they're desperate to protect themselves, when they shoot innocent children, when they thought they carried a bomb, when they put their things in the mouth of citizens as an act of vengeance from the death of their brothers we're so proud to oppose.
This was a messy debate, and hopefully I can make it a little easier for you guys. I'm going to look at 4 general terms in issues. Firstly, effectivity. Secondly, accountability. Thirdly, frequency and longevity of wars. And lastly, mental health. Hopefully we clarified this. Firstly, let's look at effectivity. What did we tell you from side government? Being surgical, accurate, and maybe to some extent impenetrable to sarin gas. All mechanical advantages of a lethal autonomous weapon can be applied to human soldiers as well. In 30 to 50 years, if we invested in people, they can be as powerful, as immortal to a certain degree, and they can be as accurate as a lethal autonomous weapon. That was not a part of this debate. Whether they're able to shoot in a very accurate manner was not up for debate. The second part, in terms of effectivity, is that the essence of lethal autonomous weapons is a rational thinking from an artificial intelligence standpoint. That is what we contended, because we told you humans have emotions that are especially important in the war zone. The fact that they are empathetic might make them vulnerable, but it also makes them fight in a war that is worth fighting. They'll try to avoid human casualties. They'll try, in certain instances, to avoid crossfires because they have to live with the consequences. They won't make decisions at the snap of a finger that will cost millions of lives. What is the comparison then? From a lethal autonomous weapon, if they have a singular goal and they need to achieve it in the most effective manner, they are more likely to deprioritize human life to achieve that goal. If a terrorist is hiding under a school, if a terrorist is hiding under a hospital, which currently does happen in places like Yemen, a lethal autonomous weapon is likely to destroy that whole building because it is a 100% success rate in comparison to our world, where people have to live with the consequences of killing innocent civilians and make better decisions as a result of it. In terms of effectivity, at best, we are not heartless beings. We care about human lives. These guys don't. But in terms of hacking under effectivity, we told you robots can be hacked. It has been done before. The template response from opposition is that it takes a long time, they will self-destruct, we go through a series of tests, all of which happens in status quo, yet the death count from hacked drones and the death count from hacked online war machines is uncountable. And this further increases in the side of opposition when a lethal autonomous weapon, perfectly capable of destroying states or even buildings at a time, is more likely to be commandeered under their side. No response after that. The second question then is in terms of accountability. We told you wars occur, but it's idealistic to believe that military generals don't know about war crimes occur, but it's idealistic to believe that military generals don't know about it. They knew about Abu Ghraib, they knew about torture camps in the Middle East, but they always turn a blind eye because they have levels of hatred, because it increases morale for the soldiers. Every soldier swears by the Geneva Convention, but yet war crimes still seem to happen. Which means it's very likely that the robot is going to be programmed to be merciless under your side of the house, and they're more likely to conduct the same levels of war crimes. The only difference is a soldier can speak out, but a robot cannot. Data can be deleted from those robots, and accountability is far worse. under side opposition. The third question is in terms of frequency. We fight just wars. We have enough political capital to fight those just wars. In your world, when there's zero loss of human life, we are likely to instigate unjust wars and territorial disputes that cause irreversible damages. In terms of longevity, we also told you that the relatability to human soldiers means civilians are likely to divulge information that is important in ending wars quicker and ensuring minimal loss of human casualties. As a conclusion to this issue, human loss in their world is far worse, and laws are likely to be longer and they're likely to be instigated on unjust grounds. In terms of the final issue of mental health, I believe that I understand that side opposition takes great care of soldiers, and we understand that it's unfortunate that they will never be prepared for the theatre of war, they'll be never prepared for PTSD. But these are individuals and civilians that you would put through those similar levels of harm and similar levels of trauma when they view lethal autonomous weapons coming onto their grounds and onto their borders. At the very least, a soldier consents. At the very least, a soldier goes through psychological training. Civilians don't. They suffer far worse traumatic stress.